Got a not quick video. Probably I never do quick videos, but I want to tell you guys what I've been up to, and as well explain a mechanic to you guys that I think is largely being overlooked right now. There has been some momentum going towards it, but looking at the market and looking at most crafts, especially higher level crafts, it seems like the winds of change haven't really caught on yet. Now that PoB has started working and has been implemented for PoE 2, I think that's quick to change. But even for myself, I was a little confused as the mechanic works somewhat differently than it does in Path of Exile 1. So I thought I'd share that with you guys in case you're a PoE 1 player who hasn't noticed that the change has happened, or if you're a PoE 2 player that is just confused by it. But what I want to talk to you guys about is critical strikes or critical strike damage, and as well how strong it actually is, and why I am going to be making a critical strike based mirror bow, and that is something I have been working on, and I will elaborate on that further shortly. But first I want to explain to you guys what the difference is. So in PoE 1, critical strike chance worked by taking the base critical value of a weapon or a spell. You would then add any additional sources of base crit. In PoE 1, this would include the increased critical strike gem, brittle, assassin's mark, things like that. And then you would multiply that by the total sources of increased critical strike chance. So if you had a 10% base crit weapon and you had 900% increased critical strike chance, which would be a 10x multiplier, you would then have 100% chance to crit. This is essentially the same in Path of Exile 2. Nothing really to report there, albeit there are fewer sources of that and both types of scaling. It is harder to get both increased critical strike chance and the base crit on certain things is definitely harder to come by because you don't have it with support gems and stuff. The gems and stuff work differently. There are different spells and there are different skills that can amend this somewhat, but what I'm focusing on here is just like your simple values that are available from both your tree and from weapons or spells themselves, or from items themselves rather. That's your base crit. So a critical strike chance is just the percentage on attack or on cast to perform a critical strike. Now, the amount of additional damage that does, a critical strike, the amount of additional damage it does, in PoE 1, there was one source of scaling for that, and that was called critical strike multiplier. And that had a base value of 150%, meaning without any additional sources of critical strike multiplier, a crit would do 1.5x damage, or you'd have a 50% more damage from a critical strike versus a non-critical strike. All sources of increased critical strike, though, were global in Path of Exile 1, and they added to the total of 150%. So if I had 500% increased critical strike multiplier from gear and passives, I would have a total of 650% damage on a critical strike, or a 6.5x multiplier. Now, in Path of Exile 2, this works differently, as there are two different types of scaling for the multiplier of critical strikes, not just one. And this is what confused the all hell out of me because of a craft that I came across last night, and I will show that to you guys now. As you can see here, I have hit tier 1 critical strike chance, and I hit tier 1 critical damage bonus. Now, critical strike chance is a very, very, very rare mod, and I noticed that there was not like a mirror bow that had this on there yet. But this has a 150 weighting, which means it's almost as rare as +2 arrow by itself, but it's only an item level 73 modifier. And so the problem with that is that when you're crafting, if you get +2 arrow, right, and then you get tier 1 crit chance afterwards, it's only item level 73, and because it has such a low weighting to it, that means that any modifier that is a higher item level for your third suffix than item level 73 would mean that you're basically forced to just keep critical strike or critical hit chance as your third mod, because every other second mod is very likely to be a higher item level. For example, if you hit projectile skills, which is item level 81, in the process of trying to hit critical hit chance, then once you did hit the critical hit chance, there'd be no way to roll away the proj. The same thing would be the case for dexterity, the same thing for life gained on kill, the same thing for mana gained on kill, and the same thing for critical damage bonus. And so if you wanted to get, as I did initially, +2 arrow with tier 1 or the max tier of critical hit chance and attack speed, if I was to put +2 arrow, and then I had 2 suffixes remaining from exalting it. If I were to try and get critical hit chance as my second modifier, which I would have to, since it's a higher item level than the attack speed, right? The likelihood of me rolling a modifier that was higher item level than 73 in the process of trying to hit a 150 weighted mod would basically make it impossible for me to then get attack speed, because in all likelihood, the critical hit chance would be the lowest level modifier, and that is what Witlings replace. And so I was trying to think of a clever way that I could go about doing that. And what I came to the conclusion of was that even though it would make getting the +2 to arrows more difficult, if instead of putting 3 suffixes on, I only kept 2 suffixes. So I would exalt and then use a greater dextral and null. I would hit the +2 arrow, and regardless if that was the first exalt or the second exalt, it is the highest item level modifier. So there's no chance that the second one would ever be higher, which means that I could then roll for crit chance as the second mod, and I would be guaranteed then when I exalted afterwards, instead of having a 95% chance to have already hit a mod that would make the crit chance obsolete, I would have about a 45% chance to hit attack speed in the process of whittling, because at that point there would only be 1, 2, 3, and 4 modifiers that were higher than it, as opposed to having, what would that be, 1 and 7, as opposed to having 61, 57 mods that were below it, right? Which would include the attack speed. Now the weights are a little bit different, but that was a much more, like the potential to actually finish that was about 5 times more effective than if you did it with 3 modifiers. I know this is a little bit convoluted, but I'm getting to the point, trust me. In the process of myself going for that, though, the first mod I ended up hitting was actually tier 1 to crit hit the critical strike chance, which gives +5% to the base. On a bow, which has 5% base crit, this gives it a base crit of 10%. And then on the tree, there is the passive skill over here. Where is it? I can't find it, but there it is. This one that gives 1% to base crit. So that would change the base crit of a bow from 5% base to now 11%. Now, because that has a 150 weight, even though I really wanted to get +2 arrow first, I figured, well, we'll see. We'll roll with a whittling, the second suffix that I have on there. Maybe we'll get super incredibly lucky and we'll hit like an arrow. And wouldn't you know it, I ended up hitting tier 1 to critical damage bonus. And if you look here, critical damage bonus is the same item level as the critical hit chance. And it's also a 225 weighting, which is incredibly rare. As you can see, the total weighting of the overall pool is 52,750. Now, obviously, crit hit chance and crit damage bonus synergize incredibly well. I always wanted to make a critical strike focused bow, but I was a little bit confused as to how the scaling of critical damage bonus was different than the quiver that I had, or the quivers I was looking at, because if you notice, on a quiver, it says increased critical damage bonus for attack damage, and then if you look at like an amulet, it says increased critical damage bonus, and then if you look on a weapon, it says critical damage bonus. So you've got critical damage bonus, increased critical damage bonus, increased critical damage bonus for attacks, and I wasn't exactly sure how that scaled, and when I looked on the wiki, it said it worked the same as PoE 1, but people in my chat were saying it worked differently. The other day I was struggling with POB because it didn't work with Adorned. There were all these issues and there was a lot of noise going on, so I went to bed, and then today before I started stream, before I recorded this video, I tried to figure it out, and what I can say definitively was, boy was I wrong about the strength of critical strikes. They are absolutely insane. So that leads me to the follow-up to how critical strike chance and critical strike multi worked in PoE 1, and I'm going to explain to you guys now the difference between how the global critical strike multiplier in PoE 1 worked, and how these 3 different mods I just pointed out to you work here in Path of Exile 2. So, in PoE 2, the multiplier bonus for crits works differently. As I said, there are 2 types of scaling. There is critical damage bonus, and there is increased critical damage bonus. Increased critical damage bonus for attacks is the same thing as increased critical damage bonus, but obviously it only applies to attacks. Now, despite the similarity in the name, they work actually quite differently. And I know my notepad skills are not that great, but bear with me here. If we were to look at, so the difference is that the base critical damage bonus equals 100%, which is this is an increased, which equals a 2x multiplier. So if you have no additional sources of increased critical damage bonus or critical damage bonus, then for your critical strike chances, we'll do 2 times the amount of damage. Now, if you have critical damage bonus, which only shows up on weapons, or on weapons, and I think you can get it as well from like Sniper's Mark and other sources, but critical damage bonus without the increase in front of it, that applies to this base value here. So if you take a look at our weapon, we have the max roll of 39 to critical damage bonus on the suffix, and then we've got 24 to critical damage bonus from these 2 runes, for a total of 63 critical damage bonus. So, in the thing I was just pointing out there, we would then have 163% critical damage bonus, which would be a 2.63 multiplier. Now, increased critical damage bonus works basically like increased crit multi does in Path of Exile 1. So increased critical damage bonus is then is a additive, and then you take all values of increased critical damage bonus and add those together. So let's say we had 500% increase. So if we had 500% increase critical damage bonus, that would equal 6x, right? And so if we then took our base value, you then multiply this by the base value you have here. So you could just look at it like this if you want. In the case of if you just had the base CD bonus, so you don't have it on your runes, or you don't have it on your suffix, that would be 6 times 1. 6 times 1, which would equal a 6 times damage, right? So every time you did a crit, let's say you had a 100% chance to crit, when you attacked or cast a spell, you would do 6 times the amount of damage. Now, if you look at the second one, that would then, and we had the same amount of increased critical damage bonus, if you had, it would be 1.63 times 6, which is 9.78. So that would be a 9.7x multiplier. So instead of doing 6 times your damage, you do 9.78 times your damage. Now, that is obviously insane, because the crit damage bonus affects the base multiplier that all of your increases thereafter come to. So in the case I just said right there, by having the 2 crit damage bonus modifiers from the rune and from the suffix, if we were to have, again, as I said, 500% crit damage bonus, the difference of a critical strike, instead of being 6 times damage, it goes to 9.78 times, which means that having those 2 mods on there makes our attacks, our critical strikes, do more than 50% more damage than if we did not have that on there. And I wanted to fiddle around with this on PoB to see if it was possible to get 100% and how much stronger it was and stuff. And this is a very, very preliminary tree. I was just trying to see how different mechanics interacted and stuff like that, if it was possible to get 100%. And you can see here, I do have a 100% crit chance. And you can see I have 998% critical strike multiplier. Or if you look at a bow right here, if I take critical damage bonus and I try to switch that to fizz, okay, a 20% fizz rune is worth 2.5% average damage. And if we look at critical damage bonus, it's worth 6.6%. So it's pretty insane. And a lot of the builds right now are not crit-based whatsoever. I think they're heavily focusing, especially lightning builds, on Lightning Rod. Now, Lightning Rod does make it lucky, but we're talking about something that basically gives you 10 times your damage. And because there are so few sources of base crit, without having the base critical strike chance, or the base critical hit chance on the weapon, a bow is really going to max out around, and this is notwithstanding skills, it's going to max out around 6% base crit. However, if you get the 5% base crit, it goes up to 11. And then, and this totally eluded me at first too, the crit damage bonus, if you do have the crit hit chance on there, it makes things way, 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 way better. If you were to remove these two modifiers, for example, and again, this tree is not fully done, but let's just arbitrarily decide to remove the crit damage bonus here from the bow that we have. Oh, shoot. What did I just do? Oh, add modifier. Shoot. What did I, fizz. What just happened? Cancel. Sorry about that. If we were to move the crit damage bonus, for example, from this right here, let's take that away. We'll see. So the 26 million DPS there. So we're going to get rid of that base multiplier, and we'll save it. 17 million. So that is about a 50% DPS loss. Now, if we compare that, for example, to if I were to put that to the double fizz and to put, let's say, attack speed, right? We're going to only 22 million. So that's like your conventional bow right there, right? And that's actually still counting in the crit chance on this version here. This is what I was planning on doing previously, right? The tier 1 crit chance at the plus attack speed. This actually has prod skills. +2 arrow might be in there as well, but that doesn't show up directly on there. And I think it depends what skill you're using. But regardless, the critical hit chance, what I really wanted to discuss here, I suppose, and what's different is critical damage bonus versus increased critical damage bonus, and just how obscene it is to actually have that stat on there. Again, T1 attack speed, which is, because it affects the tool, or not the tooltip, but when you look on the trade site, right, that's going to show your PDPS. I think that could be a little bit deceiving, because, again, as you see here, this one has that tier 1 attack speed, but if we switch that over to crit damage bonus, you can see crit damage bonus is actually 11% more damage than tier 1 attack speed here. And we've got the fizz runes on there right now. All right, we got 20% fizz rune, and if we switch that to the crit damage bonus, 7.5% more damage. And, oops, sorry, if we switch it again over to, on the second one, another 7% more damage, which is just absolutely crazy. So, again, save that, and that's what we're going to go with. So, what I really wanted to show you guys there was just how crazy the crit bonus was and how that can scale with crit chance. For myself, even, maybe I'm just retarded and I'm falling behind the pack. So maybe I was the only one who didn't really understand the difference there. But I think the wording is very similar. So you have increased crit bonus, which is the base value that gets added to the 100, and then that is multiplied by all sources of increased critical damage bonus. And with the difference being increased critical damage bonus that doesn't say with attacks, means that it applies to all things. With attacks only applies to that. And then one other thing of note is that if you do have increased critical damage bonus as a rune, it only applies to attacks from the weapon itself. It's not global on the rune side of things. Yeah, so some of you saw me post this on my community section and were saying that it's too bad I hit accuracy. As a side note, accuracy is part of the hybrid fizz modifier. This bow only has 5 mods on it total right now. The reason why I posted it like that last night is because I hit the crit hit chance and the crit bonus. And this was really before I did all the math on this and actually figured out how strong it was. But I was actually just looking this from a pure crafting perspective, not from a utilitarian perspective, because with a weighting of 150 and a weighting of 225, the odds of being able to hit the two of these sequentially with only 2 modifiers, as I have here, is actually 1 in 35,000. And it was 18 divines per attempt, because dextral annuls were 18 divs last night. I think they're 15 right now. But that means it would cost somewhere around 600,000 divines to get tier 1 crit chance and tier 1 crit bonus together back to back on a bow like this, assuming that you had to dextral annul each time. And so from my perspective as a crafter, I was like, these are obviously 2 mods that are synergized well, but I didn't really, because none of the mirror bows, or very few of the mirror weapons I've seen at all, even have crit damage bonus on them at all, like not with the runes, not with the suffix, and I didn't want to not really understand the mechanic of crit and crit bonus when I knew that this was so rare. And luckily I made that decision because, oh my God, is it strong. So I just want to let you guys know that and give you an update on this weapon I'm working on here. We do have to go for that final mod. And in this case, obviously arrows would be nice, but it's fairly unrealistic. Plus projectile gems or any attack speed would be fine. And I do think that irrespective of what you get as a third suffix, the fact that you have those two things on there will make it better, if not necessarily better or competitive with any bow that is on the market right now. When I tested it myself, it was actually better than the mirror bows. So that obviously is contingent on your setup. How much crit do you have? How much crit bonus? To say that as a universal, it's better, it's worse, it would just be patently false. However, if you do go for a full crit setup, the crit bonus as the suffix here with the runes, I would say is pretty much absolutely essential. For those of you curious, as a sort of an addendum to that, how it was possible to get 100% crit chance, what I did for that was use the Adorn Jewels. And instead of using the Quiver, where you have moves, equipped bonus from Quiver, where, with Fubgun's version and stuff, you might be using move speed or attack speed as a suffix, you can get increased critical strike chance with attacks, 16%, along with the 15% from Quiver, which means that you would get 32 on a max roll. You would get 32% crit hit chance, which works out to be like 3.6% base crit or like total crit, because you have 11% on the bow, and then you also get 30% increased bonuses from Quiver, and you can roll crit on the Quiver. You can get a 30 crit chance on the implicit like this, or you can also get a suffix like this that has 38% increased critical strike chance. So when you stack that up with the Adorned, that's how you can get there as well. Not to mention, there's a variety of different crit passives that I'm sure all of you have the capacity to find yourselves. But it is absolutely possible to get 100%. And the crit damage bonus, it's 800, 1,000, 1,200%. And if you remove, as I pointed out, if you remove the crit damage bonus and the runes with crit damage bonus, it is basically like 50% less than that. So I actually think that these two mods are probably best in slot here, assuming you have the scaling and the tree and the crit elsewhere. And I think this is something that is largely overlooked. And also, as a heads up, I was just checking the market, and across multiple other classes, it seems like this is being largely ignored. I was able to find like 50 different things that are pretty insane, like this amulet, which has +3 to melee skills, tier 1 crit chance, tier 1 increased crit bonus, a bunch of quivers with that too. I think there's going to be a massive meta shift towards crit at a certain point, especially because PoB is working now. And I'm going to be working on this bow, and I'm going to be working on that final suffix. I did the math on it, guys, and the odds are about roughly 60% that I would hit either crit attack speed, tier 1, 2, or 3, projectile skill gems, either tier 3, like +3, +4, +5, or hit plus arrow. +1 arrow or +2 arrow. I have about a 66% chance that I would hit one of those, and about a 34% chance that I would hit one of the modifiers that would be higher item level than both of those, meaning that you couldn't replace them. So that would be tier 1 dexterity, mana gain on kill, or life gained on kill. As I mentioned, to get the two of these together is the first two mods. Takes like 35,000 tries or something. And so I really don't have too much control over that final one. It's just going to be a matter of exalting it and then using whittling or whittling with a dextral erasure, and then praying to RN Jesus that I get either, projectile gems, attack speed, or arrow. And if I do, I'm almost certain that this would be the best bow in the game. And regardless, I will make it absolutely affordable for anyone who wants to try it out. But hopefully that explanation helped clear some things up for you guys that maybe were confused by what those things meant, or maybe give you some ideas to fiddle around with. I encourage you guys to check out PoB and to check out the trade site to see if you can find any good deals with crit-based stuff, because I think the crit wave is coming, baby. And I'll keep you guys updated with what goes on with the bow. I've got about 10 mirrors worth of omens here, as you can see. So let's hopefully get this done tonight, because after tonight's stream, for those watching on YouTube, I'm posting this on Tuesday night. I'm going to be gone until Sunday, so I'm hoping to get this done before I go, and I will definitely keep you guys updated. All right, hope you enjoyed, fellas. Peace.